Chief, why did you break silence? Lieutenant Commander Jason Miller kept his voice low, but Lauren Hayes heard the question beneath the distant chaos. They were pressed behind a stone wall overlooking the courtyard their team had been seconds away from entering. Lauren didn't answer. Not yet. Across the compound, a second-floor window shifted. Then another. Jason watched both. His jaw tightened. 3 seconds earlier, Lauren had broken a communications rule Jason had made absolute. 1 transmission. 1 sentence. And 6 operators had stopped moving. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in courage and respect, hit like and subscribe. These stories inspire change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to Lauren. Ryan Cooper crouched several yards ahead, staring into the courtyard. He had been first in line. First through the corridor. If Lauren had waited another few seconds, he would have been standing in the center of that open ground. Now nobody was. A faint movement passed behind the 4th window. Jason saw it this time. He looked at Lauren. How long did you know? Lauren kept her eyes on the building. I didn't. Jason frowned. Then why did you transmit? Lauren finally turned toward him. Because by the time I knew, Cooper would have been inside. Another sound echoed from the compound. Ryan glanced back. What exactly did you see? Lauren didn't answer him either. Her attention remained fixed on 6 windows surrounding the courtyard. Every one of them faced inward. Every one of them had looked empty. Until the team stopped. Jason raised 2 fingers and signaled everyone to remain behind cover. No one argued. Less than a minute earlier, he would have demanded an explanation before allowing anyone to violate radio discipline. Now he was looking at the place his men should have been standing. Empty. That was explanation enough. Lauren checked her watch. 52 minutes earlier, Jason Miller had looked every operator in the eyes and given one order. No unnecessary transmissions. No exceptions. Lauren had acknowledged it like everyone else. She had every intention of obeying. What none of them knew was that the valley would spend the next 52 minutes quietly showing Lauren why silence was about to become more dangerous than speaking. At 0435, Jason Miller gathered the team beneath the dark outline of an abandoned maintenance shelter. No one spoke above a whisper. Beyond them, the valley descended toward a cluster of concrete buildings barely visible beneath the fading night. Their objective sat near the center of the compound. Lauren Hayes checked her radio one final time. Battery. Channel. Connection. Secure. Jason unfolded the map across a metal case. We enter from the east ridge. His finger traced the route. Cooper takes point. Carter covers rear security. Hayes stays on observation. Lauren studied the marked buildings. The route was familiar. They had rehearsed it twice. Jason looked around the team. Once we're inside the valley, nobody transmits unless I call for it. Ryan Cooper nodded. The others followed. Jason's eyes stopped on Lauren. Especially observation. Lauren looked up. If you see something, signal it. Understood. No unnecessary traffic. Copy. Jason folded the map. That was the last word Lauren transmitted for almost an hour. They moved at 0438. The descent was slow. Boots pressed carefully into dry soil while the compound grew larger below them. Lauren stayed several yards behind Ryan, scanning rooftops through her optics. Nothing moved. At first, that was exactly what they wanted. No vehicles. No patrols. No lights. The valley seemed asleep. Ryan raised a fist. The team stopped. He pointed toward the road. Clear. Jason signaled forward. Lauren followed. Then she noticed the vehicle. A dark utility truck sat beside the western building. It had been there in the reconnaissance photographs. But something was different. Lauren lowered her optics. Looked again. The truck had been turned around. Its front now faced the road. A small detail. Not enough to stop the mission. She touched 2 fingers to her eyes, then pointed toward the vehicle. Jason saw the signal. He studied the truck. Then waved the team onward. Lauren moved with them. 5 minutes later, she noticed something else. A thin antenna rose above a rooftop near the center building. She didn't remember it from the photographs. Again, she signaled. Again, Jason checked. Again, nothing happened. No alarm. No visible threat. Only another detail that didn't belong. Lauren said nothing. That was the rule. And for now, the rule still made sense. But as the team descended deeper into the valley, Lauren began collecting those small differences in her mind. The truck. The antenna. The empty rooftops. Individually, they meant almost nothing. Together, they were beginning to feel like the first words of a warning nobody had spoken yet. By 04:58, the compound should have shown signs of life. It didn't. Lauren Hayes lay behind a low ridge of stone, optics fixed on the northern rooftops while Ryan Cooper studied the route ahead. A sentry position appeared in the reconnaissance photographs. Sandbags. A chair. A narrow view over the eastern approach. The sandbags were still there. The chair was gone. So was the sentry. Lauren shifted her optics toward the next rooftop. Empty. Then the next. Nothing. Ryan looked back and gave the hand signal. Clear. Jason Miller answered with 2 fingers. Continue. Lauren stayed still for another second. An undefended approach should have made the mission easier. Instead, it bothered her. The utility truck had been repositioned. A new antenna stood above the central building. Now the observation posts were empty. 3 changes. No explanation. Lauren rose and followed the team. They reached the outer wall 6 minutes later. Ryan moved first, checking the corner before signaling the others through. Lauren entered last. The air inside the compound felt different. Still. Contained. A piece of fabric hanging from a balcony barely moved in the morning breeze. Lauren scanned the second floor. One window stood open several inches. She stopped. According to the reconnaissance photographs, that room had no reason to matter. It wasn't near the objective. It didn't overlook the eastern perimeter. It faced inward. Toward the courtyard. Lauren raised 2 fingers to her eyes and pointed. Jason followed her signal. He studied the window. Nothing appeared. He looked back at Lauren. She gave a small shake of her head. No confirmed threat. Jason signaled forward. Ryan continued. Lauren followed, but her attention remained on the building. She wanted to transmit. Not because she had an answer. Because the questions were accumulating faster than the team was moving. But radio silence existed for a reason. Breaking it over suspicion could expose more than it protected. So she kept her hand away from the transmit switch. At 0509, Ryan reached the next corner. He checked the corridor. Clear. Jason glanced at his watch. They were ahead of schedule. Everything was going better than planned. Lauren looked back at the empty rooftop. Then at the antenna. Then at the half-open window. Her expression tightened. The problem wasn't what she could see. It was what should have been there and wasn't. Guards. Movement. Resistance. Someone had prepared this compound for visitors. Lauren was beginning to suspect they weren't trying to keep the seals out. They were waiting for them to come farther in. At 0514, Ryan Cooper reached the outer edge of the courtyard. He raised a fist. The team stopped behind him. Lauren Hayes remained near the rear, studying the compound through her optics. Nothing moved. That was becoming the problem. The courtyard was rectangular, bordered by two-story concrete buildings on three sides. A narrow corridor provided the cleanest approach from the east. According to the reconnaissance photographs, it was exactly where they were supposed to go. Ryan checked the corridor. Clear. He looked back. Jason Miller signaled him forward. Lauren shifted her attention upward. One window. Then another. 6 in total. Every one overlooked the courtyard. No movement behind the glass. No silhouettes. No weapons. Just darkness. Ryan advanced several yards. Lauren looked toward the rooftop where the sentry should have been. Still empty. Her eyes moved to the new antenna. Then the repositioned truck. Then back to the windows. Something connected them. She just couldn't prove what. Jason glanced at his watch. They were still ahead of schedule. Ryan reached the next section of cover and signaled. Clear. Jason moved the team closer. Lauren followed. Her boots stopped. Beside a doorway. Fresh scrape marks cut across the dust near the threshold. She crouched. Something heavy had been moved recently. Not days ago. Hours, maybe less. Lauren looked through the doorway. Empty room. Nothing obvious. She rose slowly. Ryan was already moving again. The mission felt too easy. No sentries. No challenge at the perimeter. No reaction to their approach. The team had entered deeper than intelligence predicted without encountering anyone. Lauren looked at Jason. He was focused on Ryan and the route ahead. She could signal another anomaly. But what would she signal? Scratches? Empty windows? A feeling? Radio silence wasn't preventing Lauren from warning the team. Lack of certainty was. Ryan reached the corridor leading directly into the courtyard. He paused. Checked left. Checked right. Then raised his hand. Clear. Jason prepared to send him through. Lauren looked up. A shape appeared behind a second-floor window. Gone. Her body tightened. She brought her optics up. Nothing. Then another movement. Different window. Not crossing the room. Pulling away from the glass. Lauren's hand moved toward her radio. Stopped. 2 shadows weren't enough. Not yet. Ryan stepped into the corridor. Lauren scanned the windows again. 1. 2. 3. All positioned above the open ground Ryan was approaching. Then she noticed something she should have recognized earlier. The windows weren't arranged to watch the perimeter. They couldn't see the eastern ridge well. They couldn't cover the road effectively. They weren't designed to see people coming. They were positioned to see people after they arrived. Lauren's fingers touched the transmit switch. Ryan continued toward the courtyard. Jason remained silent. So did Lauren. For the moment. But the mission had changed. The question was no longer whether something was waiting inside. It was whether Lauren would understand it before Ryan took the final few steps. 17 seconds. That was how long Ryan Cooper had before he reached the center of the courtyard. Lauren Hayes didn't know the number exactly. She knew it by distance. By pace. By the rhythm of Ryan's movement through the corridor. He advanced carefully. Rifle steady, eyes covering the opening ahead. Nothing challenged him. Lauren raised her optics. The first window remained dark. The second looked empty. At the third, something moved. Not much. A shoulder pulling away. Ryan continued. Lauren's thumb rested against the transmit switch. Radio silence. Jason Miller's order had been clear. Nobody transmitted unless he called for it. Lauren had obeyed for nearly an hour. 12 seconds. A silhouette appeared along the rooftop. Lauren shifted her optics upward. The figure wasn't aiming at Ryan. It was watching him. That bothered her more. Someone who intended to stop the team at the perimeter would already have acted. This person was waiting. Lauren looked back toward the courtyard. 6 windows. 3 buildings. 1 open space in the middle. Ryan was walking directly toward it. 8 seconds. Movement behind the second window. Then the 5th. Lauren's breathing slowed. The truck turned toward the road. The new antenna. Empty sentry positions. Fresh scrape marks. Windows facing inward. None of the details had been enough alone. Together, they formed something different. A pattern. Ryan reached the final section of the corridor. Jason raised 2 fingers. Prepare to move. Lauren touched the radio. Still she didn't transmit. If she was wrong, she would break communications discipline based on incomplete information. If she was right, a small shape shifted behind the 4th window. Lauren focused. A hand. Then nothing. Ryan took another step. 5 seconds. Lauren stopped looking for a weapon. She looked at the architecture. That was when she saw it. Every useful line of sight converged on the same place. The courtyard. Not the perimeter. Not the road. Not the ridge. The courtyard. Ryan was approaching an open space surrounded by positions that had been deliberately left quiet. Lauren understood. They weren't slipping past the defense. They were being allowed through it. Ryan reached the threshold. Jason began moving behind him. Lauren pressed the transmit switch. For the first time since 0435, her voice entered the team's radios. Miller, stop the team, every window is facing the courtyard. Jason froze. His fist went up. Ryan stopped instantly. 1 step short of entering the open ground. Nobody asked why. Nobody had time. 2 seconds passed. Movement appeared behind the 1st window. Then the 2nd. Then the 4th. Jason looked up. His expression changed. Lauren released the transmit switch. Radio silence was over. And for the first time that morning, everyone else could finally see what she had been watching take shape. Back. Now. Jason Miller's command moved through the team the instant the 4th window came alive. Ryan Cooper stepped away from the courtyard threshold and pressed against the corridor wall. Lauren Hayes stayed behind cover, optics fixed upward. Movement, 2nd floor. North building. Jason signaled. The team shifted. A sharp crack echoed across the courtyard. Concrete dust jumped from the wall near Ryan. Nobody needed another explanation. The open ground ahead had become exactly what Lauren feared. A trap. Cooper, fall back. Ryan moved. Lauren tracked the windows. Hold. Ryan froze behind a concrete pillar. A shadow crossed the 3rd window. Then disappeared. Wait. Jason glanced toward Lauren. She kept watching. 2 seconds. 3. Clear. Move. Ryan crossed the gap and reached the team. Jason immediately redirected them toward the eastern structures. The original plan was gone. Now they needed distance. Lauren lowered her optics long enough to move with them. Her radio stayed active. But she didn't fill it with noise. Rear route clear. They moved. Upper right. Jason stopped the element. A figure disappeared behind a rooftop barrier. Continue. The team advanced again. For nearly an hour, Lauren had said nothing. Now every word changed somebody's movement. Jason stopped questioning the calls. He heard. Decided. Acted. They reached the outer building and took cover behind a thick concrete wall. Ryan crouched beside Lauren. You saw all of that before we went in. Pieces. Another sound echoed behind them. Jason looked toward the courtyard. We need the east route. Lauren checked it through her optics. The repositioned utility truck sat near the road. For the first time, its position made sense. It wasn't parked for convenience. It partially blocked the cleanest withdrawal lane. East Road compromised, Lauren said. Jason turned. Alternative? Lauren scanned south. A narrow drainage path ran behind the maintenance structures. No windows overlooking it. No visible movement. South drainage route. Jason nodded. Team, south. They moved immediately. No debate. No hesitation. The compound that had seemed empty minutes earlier now showed movement everywhere Lauren had been watching. Windows. Rooftops. Doorways. The silence had never meant nobody was there. It meant somebody had been waiting. The team reached the drainage wall. Jason counted them as they crossed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ryan came through sixth. Lauren followed. Jason moved last. Everyone was still there. Only after they reached deeper cover did Jason turn toward her. Chief. Lauren looked at him. He glanced back toward the compound. You broke silence. Yes, sir. A beat. Good. Lauren checked the route ahead. There was no smile. No relief yet. They still had to get home. But one thing had changed. For the first time that morning, Jason Miller wasn't telling Lauren Hayes when she was allowed to speak. He was listening for what she would say next. They reached the southern drainage channel at 0534. Jason Miller raised a fist. Everyone stopped. The compound was now several hundred yards behind them, partly hidden by broken terrain and low concrete structures. The morning light had strengthened, turning the valley from gray to pale gold. Ryan Cooper leaned against the drainage wall. You really saw that coming? Lauren Hayes kept her optics on the ridge. No, Ryan frowned. You stopped me one step before that courtyard. I saw enough. Jason looked toward her. How much is enough? Lauren lowered the optics. Enough to stop moving. A distant sound carried through the valley. Jason immediately signaled everyone down. Lauren returned to her scope. Nothing. Then movement appeared along the eastern rooftop. 2 figures. East side. Jason shifted closer. Tracking us. Lauren watched. One figure moved toward the antenna. The other remained near the roof edge. Maybe. Ryan glanced back toward the compound. So what gave it away? Lauren didn't answer. Not yet. Jason pointed south. We keep moving. The team followed the drainage channel until the walls narrowed around them. Lauren remained near the rear. Her radio was no longer silent, but she still treated every transmission as something that had to earn its place. Hold. The team stopped. Lauren studied a rise ahead. Nothing moved. 5 seconds. Clear. They continued. Ryan looked back at her. That's all you're giving us now? One word at a time. Lauren almost smiled. One was enough earlier. Ryan shook his head. Fair. At 0541, they reached a low ridge overlooking the extraction route. Jason counted the team again. Everyone present. Everyone moving. Only then did some of the tension leave his face. He crouched beside Lauren. How did you know? Lauren continued watching the valley. I didn't. Jason waited. Not at first. She lowered her optics. The truck had been repositioned. New antenna. No sentries where there should have been sentries. Ryan listened from several feet away. Lauren continued. Fresh scrape marks inside the wall. Then the windows. Jason looked toward the distant compound. All facing inward. Lauren nodded. They weren't watching for us to arrive. Ryan understood first. They were watching where we'd end up. Yes. Jason was silent for a moment. And if you'd been wrong? Lauren looked at him. Then I'd explain why I broke silence. She glanced toward Ryan. If I'd stayed quiet and been right, Cooper wouldn't be here to complain about it. Ryan opened his mouth. Then closed it. For once, he had nothing to say. Jason looked back toward the compound. The warning signs had been there for all of them. Lauren hadn't seen the future. She hadn't guessed. She had simply noticed 4 small details, waited until they became one pattern, and spoken before that pattern became a casualty report. Jason finally nodded. Move out. Lauren raised her optics again. The team continued toward extraction. This time, when silence returned to their radios, it meant something different. Nobody was waiting for Lauren to follow the rule. They trusted her to know when the rule had stopped protecting them. The helicopter arrived at 0603, only after the last operator climbed aboard did Jason Miller allow himself to look back at the valley. From the air, the compound seemed harmless again. Gray buildings. Empty roads. Silent rooftops. Nothing about it suggested how close 6 operators had come to walking into the same courtyard at the same time. Ryan Cooper sat across from Lauren Hayes. For several minutes, neither spoke. Then Ryan tapped the side of his helmet. That sentence. Lauren looked at him. You know I'm going to hear it in my sleep. You stopped. Because Miller stopped me. Jason heard that from the next seat. Because Hayes gave me a reason. Ryan nodded slowly. Nobody said anything else. Back at base, the team moved directly into debrief. The room felt almost too ordinary after the valley. White walls. Metal chairs. A digital map glowing on the screen. Jason stood beside it. Start from the eastern approach. Lauren walked through the sequence without adding drama. The truck. The antenna. The missing sentries. The open window. The scrape marks. Then the courtyard. Jason changed the image to an overhead photograph. 6 windows surrounded the open space. Ryan leaned forward. From above, the geometry was obvious. From the ground, it hadn't been. Jason looked at Lauren. When did suspicion become certainty? It didn't. Ryan frowned. Lauren pointed toward the courtyard. It became enough. Jason waited. Certainty would have come after Cooper stepped inside. The room went quiet. Too late. Everyone understood it. Jason folded his arms. You knew the communications order. Yes, sir. You understood why it existed. Yes. And you broke it. Yes. No apology. No pride. Just the facts. Jason glanced toward Ryan. If she hadn't? Ryan looked at the image. He didn't answer immediately. I would have entered. Jason nodded. Then looked back at Lauren. And if you'd been wrong? Lauren gave the same answer she had on the ridge. I'd explain why I transmitted. A beat. If I stayed quiet and I was right, we'd be explaining something else. Nobody needed her to finish. Jason turned off the screen. The room darkened for a second before the overhead lights adjusted. Radio discipline exists to protect the team, he said. His eyes moved across the operators. It isn't valuable because it's a rule. It's valuable because of what the rule prevents. Then he looked at Lauren. And sometimes judgment has to recognize when the danger changes. Lauren said nothing. Ryan leaned back in his chair. That morning, one sentence had saved lives. But the sentence wasn't the remarkable part. The remarkable part was everything Lauren had done before speaking. She had watched. Waited. Questioned her own conclusion. And when silence finally became more dangerous than being heard, she had used exactly as many words as the team needed. No more. No less. 3 weeks later, Jason Miller wrote 2 words across the briefing room board. Radio discipline. 8 operators sat facing him. Lauren Hayes stood near the back wall, checking a handheld radio while Ryan Cooper leaned against the table beside her. Jason capped the marker. What's the rule? A young operator answered immediately. Don't transmit unless authorized. Jason looked at him. That's procedure. The operator hesitated. Jason turned back toward the board. I'm asking about judgment. Nobody answered. Ryan glanced toward Lauren. She kept working. Battery secure. Channel correct. Connection tested. The same quiet routine she had followed before the valley. Jason drew a line beneath the words. Radio silence exists for a reason. Unnecessary transmissions create unnecessary risk. He paused. But following procedure without understanding its purpose isn't discipline. Now Lauren looked up. Jason wrote another sentence. Know when silence becomes dangerous. The room stayed quiet. One operator raised his hand. So we decide when to break it? No, Jason faced him. You observe. You think. You understand the consequences of being wrong. His eyes moved briefly toward Lauren. And when the consequences of staying silent become worse, you make the call and own it. Ryan folded his arms. The young operator looked toward Lauren. Is that what happened in the valley? Lauren returned the radio to the table. Jason answered before she could. Hayes saw details the rest of us saw separately. He pointed toward the board. She connected them before we did. Lauren shook her head slightly. Before we had time to. Jason accepted the correction. Fair. Ryan smiled. She also stopped me one step before I walked into that courtyard. Lauren looked at him. You're still complaining about it. Planning to for years. A few operators laughed. Lauren didn't. But the corner of her mouth moved. Jason erased the board except for the final sentence. The briefing ended. Chairs shifted. Operators collected their equipment. Ryan stopped beside Lauren. You know they're going to tell that story now. They'll improve it. They always do. By next month, there'll be 20 windows. Ryan laughed. And you'll have seen everything from 5 miles away. Lauren picked up her radio. That sounds exhausting. Ryan headed toward the door. Lauren remained behind for a moment. Her thumb rested over the transmit switch. 3 weeks earlier, that same switch had carried one sentence through 52 minutes of silence. No speech. No warning repeated twice. Just enough information at exactly the right moment. Jason paused at the doorway. Hayes. Lauren looked over. Good call. She nodded once. Then switched the radio off. Click. No medal ceremony waited outside. No applause followed her into the corridor. 6 operators had simply returned home because one person noticed what silence was hiding, and understood when the rule designed to protect them had stopped doing its job. Lauren walked toward the staging bay. Behind her, one sentence remained on the board. Know when silence becomes dangerous.